Make sure y'all stay on point with the puncher's point. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the puncher's point. It's every day, bro. And honestly, we got some stuff to talk about in this episode. We got some stuff to kind of wrap up. But regardless, before we get into anything else, Jake Paul defeats Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. by unanimous decision, and he improves to 12-1. Now, before I say anything else, I just want to say shout out to ZURDO Ramírez on retaining his cruiserweight belts, because now all of a sudden, like I said in the prediction episode, now ZURDO Ramírez, Jake Paul, they might be colliding paths soon. So overall, I do think there's a lot to wrap up and a lot to unwind in this episode, and we're going to get to it. Obviously, we're going to grade the fight first, so let's get straight into that. Jake Paul, 12-1, defeats Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Now, strategy. I've said it before, and again, I'm gonna say it one more time for everybody listening. I am not a Jake Paul fan. By no means, I am not a Jake Paul fan. You can ask anybody I talk to. I'm not a Jake Paul fan. I really had to say that 3 times to emphasize it. But with that being said, the one thing I can honestly respect about Jake Paul is every single time he steps into the ring, he's constantly improving. Out of all these little influencer boxers, he's the one who stepped out of that influencer box and is now fighting real boxers. Now, say what you want about Julio Cesar Chavez. Say what you want to say about Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., 39 years old. Obviously, he's not the same fighter that he was 10, 13 years ago. But what I will say about Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is he is a real fighter with over 60 fights. And on top of that, he's a real fighter who was a former world champion and has been in the ring with former world champions as well. He's been in the ring with guys like Canelo Alvarez, guys like Daniel Jacobs, guys like Sergio Martinez. So let's not sit here and act like Julio Cesar Chavez is a nobody. With that being said, we're going to go straight into the strategy. I'm not going to lie to you. Overall, I'm going to have to give the strategy I'm going to have to, I'm going to give it a 7.5. And here's why. What I liked from Jake Paul, the one thing I think that he really improved on this fight was he wasn't just looking for that right hand. Kind of similar to what I said about Deontay Wilder. Sometimes he's just constantly looking for that right hand. It's the same thing for Jake Paul. I said it before, that's his biggest power punch. Does he have an uppercut? Absolutely, but he loves that right hand. But what I noticed in this fight was Jake Paul was really using his jab effectively. He was also not just moving around laterally, but there were moments where he was cutting angles. There were moments where Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. would land a shot on him, especially in the later rounds. He would land a shot on him on the ropes, and Jake Paul would just turn it around, and then all of a sudden Julio Cesar Chavez was on the ropes. So I really liked how Jake Paul was using his movement. He wasn't just doing back and forth lateral movement. He was in a way cutting angles. He was throwing uppercuts. He was also throwing left hooks. He was targeting the body a lot. And these are things that in some fights I did not see Jake Paul do that much. There will be occasional moments where he would, maybe land a couple body shots. There will be occasional moments where he might throw a left hook. He might knock you out with an uppercut, but he was always looking for that right hand. And if the right hand wasn't there, then all of a sudden he would just have to reset and try to find it again. This fight was a little bit different than those previous fights where you saw those tiny, tiny things. You see, this fight, he had more of a versatile punch style. He had more punches that he could throw, and I really do think that he improved with that. And I got to give a huge shout out to his training. So I got to give him a lot of respect there. Now, as far as Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., obviously a very, very slow start. He was barely throwing anything for the first 3 rounds, and then the fourth round happened. And the fourth round, he kind of picked it up a little bit. Fifth round, he kind of slowed down. But then the sixth round, I believe Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. won that sixth round. And what did he do to win that sixth round? I said it before. His biggest strengths were those hooks. Even in his prime, those hooks were dangerous. And even though he's not the same fighter that he used to be, those hooks are still dangerous. I mean, we just got to be honest and we just got to keep it a buck. Those hooks are still dangerous. And he was going to the inside. He was really digging. He was hitting Jake Paul with some good hooks. And honestly, Jake Paul was taking some of those hits. He was kind of eating some of them. So I got to give a big respect to Jake Paul there. Julio Cesar Chavez, after that sixth round, really started picking it up a little bit. I gave Julio Cesar Chavez round 6, 7, and 10. Those are the rounds that I had Julio Cesar Chavez winning. And I also had Julio Cesar Chavez winning round 9 as well. The overall grade that I had for this fight, I had it 96-94 Jake Paul. I know a lot of people had it a lot way wider than that, but for me, 96-94, that's the way I scored, and I gave the fight to Jake Paul. But what I noticed in the end was Julio Cesar Chavez, he started with hooks to the top. And then when he really realized that if he just pushes the gas and he continues to pressure forward, like I said, Jake Paul is going to hit those ropes. He's going to go back to those ropes because that is his resort method. And that's what he relies on. Once he gets hit with some power shots, too, he starts clinching. Once he gets hit with some power shots, he leans on those ropes and he tries to reset that way. And I knew he was going to do that, which is why I said Julio Cesar Chavez needed to put the pressure. And once he pushed the pressure, he started throwing hooks to the body. He really started getting to Jake Paul. And Jake Paul handled a lot of those punches very, very well. But at the end of the day, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was really putting some pressure on him. He was really depleting Jake Paul's gas tank. And I think that is the reason why I was looking at that fight. And I'm like, all right, even though Jake Paul is improving, there's still some things that he can improve on. As far as Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., I wish he had a faster start. You know, you can't just lose the first 5 rounds and then expect to come back. I really wish he had a faster start. And I know he lost the first 11 way back in the day to Sergio Martinez, and then he ended up defeating him in the 12th round. Obviously, it was a great comeback, but that was 13 years ago, and this is now. And Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is not the same fighter that he was 13 years ago. So I just don't think that strategy really correlates in this moment. So I think overall, what Jake Paul did very, very well. He was very versatile when it came to his punches. He was targeting the body a lot more. He was using not just lateral movement, he was also cutting angles, and you could tell that had a big frustration on Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And as far as Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., once he really started getting into the flow, started getting a rhythm, he really started digging to the body on the inside. He started throwing those hooks. He really started clipping Jake Paul. He started pushing Jake Paul on the back foot. And once he started doing that, he really pushed Jake Paul into a lot of positions where he wasn't comfortable. So as far as strategy, I gotta give it a 7.5. I think both guys did an overall okay job, put it that way. Now, as far as excitement, now if you're asking me what the excitement was for the first 5 rounds, I would have told you I'm giving the excitement maybe a 5 at best, but they really picked it up at the end. Honestly, they really picked it up at the end. They made it an exciting fight. There were some moments where you're looking and you see Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. clip Jake Paul with something, and you ask yourself, is Jake Paul going to fall? Is this where Jake Paul is going to collapse? And then there were moments where you're also looking at that fight, especially in the later round, where you're looking at Jake Paul and he starts really kind of trying to get back. He really starts trying to get back into the flow. He hits Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. with some good punches, and then you really start asking, is this where he's going to get the knockout? I thought it was going to be a knockout in round 7, and did not happen. So overall, I got to give the excitement a 7. I think both of these guys, they went in there and they did their thing. Both of these guys had moments. You know, it was back and forth. There was a little bit of drama. And even in the fight, what I will say is there was drama and there was a lot of controversy on whether or not he was getting hit with low blows and hits behind the head. And if you ask me, I don't think he was getting hit with low blows. I don't think he was getting hit behind the head. I think Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. underestimated Jake Paul. He went into this fight expecting to just dominate him, and when he realized that Jake Paul was better than what he thought, I believe that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. started resorting to excuses. And for me, that's when he really started focusing on the low blows, started focusing on the hits behind the head. And I think the ref did a good job of basically telling him, like, hey, shut up, fight, because this is a boxing match. I think he did a very good job of also not taking one side over the other. Like there was a moment where Jake Paul got hit with a low blow, and he told him, "Hey, look, you like." He asked him if he was okay, but he said, "Look, I ain't gonna do nothing because you're shoving his head down." So I do think this referee did a good job of maintaining balance. He did a decent job. Do I think he was maybe a little bit pro Jake Paul? Probably, but not into a sense where it could cost anybody a fight. So overall, it had all those elements and the excitement. I got to give it a 7. There wasn't anything too crazy. Each fighter had their moments, but there wasn't anything too wild or crazy to where I could bump it up a little bit more. So I'm going to give it a 7 as far as excitement. Now, the stakes. What was on the line? Well, obviously, we heard about the rumors circling about if Jake Paul wins this fight, he could potentially be in line for a title shot. And after hearing the post-fight interview, Jake Paul's really playing into this villain role because he thinks that these big names like Gervonta Davis, he thinks these champions like ZURDO Ramirez has to wait in line. But ZURDO Ramirez is a cruiserweight champion. He holds two out of the four belts in that division. Okay? Gervonta Davis is an 135-pound champion. You're not going to be able to go down to 135 pounds, and Tank ain't going to go up to 200 pounds. So that fight you can cross off your list. He thinks these people are waiting in line for him, when in reality that's not the case. And you know what? That's part of his villain persona. I am going to call out everybody. I'm going to make sure y'all hear it, and I'm going to make sure there's buzz around this. He even called out Anthony Joshua. Look, this guy is really good at fueling fire. He's really good at causing heat. He's been doing this his entire career. He's been on social media his entire career. Whether you love him or you hate him, he's good at hyping up things. He's good at generating a lot of controversy. His nickname originally going into boxing was the problem child. So this don't really change. So in my opinion, as far as the stakes, I don't know what's next for Jake Paul. I really don't. But I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna give it a 7 because I feel like with his name and as big as he is, he has the potential. He has the potential and he has the possibility to become a cruiserweight champion, to fight for a cruiserweight title. And at the same time, he's also Jake Paul. He loves controversy. He loves just adding fuel to the fire. So it wouldn't shock me if he went a different route and started fighting a bunch of retired MMA fighters, a bunch of guys with names, so he can get all this fame. Now, with that being said, I gotta give the stakes a 7 because nothing's really uncertain. He named and listed off a bunch of guys, but overall, there's not a clear plan on what he wants. Last but not least, impact. How does this impact Jake Paul? Well, here's what I will say. I'm going to give that a 7 as well. Basically, besides strategy, he's got 7s all across the board. But the reason why I give the impact a 7 is because now you have a former world champion on your resume. And even though Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., again, is not in his prime, you have that champion on your resume now. So I do think that matters. It's not a win where you can asterisk it like you did with the Mike Tyson fight where he was 62 years old. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was 39 years old, so a little bit past his prime, but regardless, he was a former world champion. You went in there, you had a decent performance against him, and now all of a sudden you put yourself in a position where I can honestly say that Jake Paul is a real fighter. And a lot of y'all aren't gonna like hearing that. A lot of y'all are gonna tell me to screw off. I don't know what I'm talking about. But here's the thing. Jake Paul went in there against a former world champion and he beat him. A former world champion who, even though hasn't really been too active in over a year, this is a former world champion that has fought the likes of Canelo Alvarez, Sergio Martinez, Daniel Jacobs. He's fought guys. He's won a world title. So, in my opinion, yes, this puts a little bit of credibility on Jake Paul. It shows that he does have some boxing skills to potentially make a run. Now, a lot of y'all are still going on the whole rant about how his fights are staged or his fights are fixed. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to confirm or deny those claims. I'm not going to agree or disagree. What I am going to say is this. Until I see something, okay? I'm not just going to go off of hearsay and try to discredit it. Until I see something, or until something gets leaked, or until something is in the air, whatever the case might be, until something convinces me that these fights are rigged, I gotta sit here and view what my eyes are seeing, which is Jake Paul going into the ring against fighters and he's having success. That's what I have to say as of right now. Who knows what could happen in the future? Maybe by the time this video is all done filming, maybe there's a lawsuit on him because he didn't pay these fighters, or maybe there's something going on where we start finding out, it starts getting revealed that his fights are elite. Maybe that happens. Who knows? I'm not going to agree or disagree, confirm or deny. I'm not going to do any of that. I just have to sit here and see what my eyes are seeing. What I'm seeing is that Jake Paul is going in there into the ring against fighters and he's beating them. So I have to stick with that. Trust me, I don't want to say, I would hate to say that Jake Paul is actually getting better in the sport of boxing and he's actually going in there and beating guys. I hate to say, I would love to say that these are rigged, but I'm not going to say something unless there's full proof on it. I'm not going to say anything until the speculation starts to draw. Okay? Am I fully convinced that he's in there just whooping guys? As of right now, yes. Is there a possibility that he could be rigging fights? Absolutely. I mean, there's an old video of him. You can go back and look at it on YouTube. He admits that boxing is rigged. I agree. But overall, I just don't have any clear proof evidence, substantial evidence to even go by those claims. So for me, going back to the impact side, I'm gonna give it a 7. I do think this impacts him in a good way, in a positive way, and who knows what his next move is. And with that being said, when we add it all up and we give an overall score, the overall score for this fight is going to be a 7.13. Now, with that being said, that rank, it's not the number one fight of season 5. However, it's probably the highest rank that I've given a Jake Paul fight. So overall, I will honestly say that he's getting better. There's definitely some things that he could improve on. But overall, there's always something that he's improving on. There's always something that I'm looking at. I'm like, okay, that wasn't in the last fight. Like, and even tiniest things like him keeping his guard up when he's going to throw punches. It's tiny things like that he's getting better at. And honestly, I see it, and I gotta give him some respect for it. Now, with all that being said, what is next for the great Jake Paul? Well, here's the thing. I gave you credit. I said you are a real boxer now. Real boxers don't fight retired MMA fighters. Real boxers do not fight YouTube influencers. Real boxers do not fight guys who are over 50 years old or are approaching 50 years old. Real boxers fight real boxers. So that's what I need to see from Jake Paul now. I need to see you go in there and fight real boxers. That's it. Okay? I liked when he was on the path of fighting guys like Ryan Borland, Andre August. He just fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I'm cool with that path. You're fighting real fighters. You called out ZURDO. You called out Badu Jack. I like that path. You're fighting real fighters. You're calling out real fighters. Let's start doing that from now on. Because here's the thing. If the next fight I hear from Jake Paul is breaking news, he's going to be fighting another retired MMA fighter. He's going to be fighting another 50-year-old boxer. He's going to go in there and he's going to fight Roy Jones Jr. or who knows who else. I don't want to see that. Fight real boxers. Continue to go through the journey of becoming a cruiserweight champion. And that's it. I would love to see him still fight Chris Billiam Smith. I do think that'll be a good fight that'll test him. Maybe he gets that chance with ZURDO. I would like to see how he does against ZURDO Ramirez because ZURDO Ramirez, after retaining his belts, and again, against a opponent who was very, very dangerous, he retains those belts. He's a cruiserweight champion. He called him out. If I know Oscar De La Hoya said that he loves working with Jake Paul, that he just makes the boxing game exciting. But you know what? You called out Badu. You called out ZURDO. There's still a champion that you haven't called out. And, the guy's right at the tip of my tongue. It's his first name's Jai, right? And his last name begins with an O. Jai Opataya. I still have not heard that man's name come out of your mouth. And I think the reason why is because now, since you're in this cruiserweight division, you know that now, since you're starting to create some buzz and generate some buzz, now you know that that fight could actually happen. I don't think he wants to step into the ring with Jai Opataya. And I don't blame him because Jai Opataya has been ripping cruiserweights in this division. And Jake Paul, I hate to say it, but I think you'd be the next one that gets whipped by him. Jai Opataya, I've not heard you call out his name. I've heard ZURDO. I've heard Badu Jack. I have not heard Jai Opataya. So you know what? Maybe that's the next fight for him. Who knows? But overall, I still think that he could use a couple fights before even getting a world championship. Again, I like him versus Chris Billiam Smith. I do think that's a good fight, and hopefully I get to see that fight. I don't think that's going to be the next fight to happen. Maybe it's ZURDO. Maybe he ends up fighting a Golden Boy again. Who knows? But overall, I do got to give a shout out to Jake Paul. He went in there. I got to give a shout out to Jake Paul. He went in there and he handled business, and that's all I could ask for him. He went in there and he did what he had to do to win. He fought a real boxer. He had a decent performance against a real boxer. There's still some weaknesses that he could tweak up. There's also some improvements. That's my overall wrap up of Jake Paul. So shout out to him for going in there and getting a decent win. Shout out to ZURDO Ramirez for retaining his cruiserweight belts. Who knows what's gonna happen in the future? But all I know is, look, it's every day, bro. Every day it seems like this guy's on my feed. Every day it seems like Jake Paul's talking crap. Every day it seems like Jake Paul is just trying to stir something. But you know what? overall, this is the sport of boxing. This is the way it's come to. And as long as he's getting better, as long as he's improving, as long as he's going in there and he's having decent boxing fights, I mean, honestly, I can't be too mad at it. So he's really embracing this villain persona. He's really embracing being the bad guy. Again, throughout his whole career, he's always drawn controversy, so I'm not shocked. But I am shocked with how much he's improving. And I just hope that he continues to box on the right path. He's not going after some influencers or retired guys that have no meaning or no influence on his impact. I'm just glad he's going into the ring. He went up against a real boxer. Hopefully he can hopefully he can continue that and start fighting some more legitimate competition. And with that being said, it's time for us to wrap up. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the Puncher's Point. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the next prediction episode. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the social medias. Y'all are not going to want to miss the content that we got in store for y'all this season in season 5. I'm telling y'all, y'all ain't going to want to miss it. Okay, we got some great things. So make sure y'all continue to tune back into the Puncher's Point for the next prediction episode. Make sure y'all look at the social medias for all the news and the updates and everything like that. And with that being said, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.